used and who is it for? Okay, so first up, what is this thing? To put it simply, this is a 6-string electric bass. By that I mean it's like an electric guitar that is bigger and lower. It is tuned like an electric guitar. It's E, A, D, G, B, E. It's just down an octave. It looks an awful lot like a Fender Jaguar. It's a very familiar electric guitar sort of shape and aesthetic. It's just lower. Is it a bass or is it a guitar? Well, we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so why does this thing exist? Let's talk about the history of the electric bass briefly from 1951 to 1966. This is a really, really important period of time in the world, but also in music and culture, and specifically to us in the changes and the innovations in the electric bass. So, 1951, Leo Fender introduces the P bass. It has a different pickup design than most of us are used to. 1956, Dan Electro, a competitor to Fender, introduces the 6-string electric bass guitar. So it's a electric guitar that's down an octave, slightly longer. And it never really fully took off like the P bass did, but it did have a very distinctive popular sound. It started to find its way onto a lot of recordings, especially in Nashville, but also in Los Angeles. It has a really distinctive, twangy, cool, low sound. 1957, Fender updates the P bass design to the design that most of us know and love with the split single coil. And this design hasn't really changed much in like 60 years. Pretty cool. Great design. 1960, the jazz bass comes along, and then the design changes a little bit in 61. But also in 61, we see the Fender Bass VI. This is released sort of as a competitor to the Dan Electro 6-string electric bass, but it's its own thing as well. And then finally in 1966, Leo Fender introduces the Mustang bass, and this is actually his last bass design at the Fender company. 4 iconic bass designs with distinctive sounds from 1951 to 1966. So the Bass 6 exists as a sort of alternative to the 4-string electric bass. It's a competitor to the Dan Electro 6-string electric bass, but it's its own thing. It has a lot of tone variation, it has a distinctive sound, and it's something that I think we should know about because it's an important part of music history. Each of these switches is assigned to a pickup. This is our neck pickup, this is our middle pickup, and this is our bridge pickup, and then we also have a low cut. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But listen to just the neck pickup, and then here's just the middle, and then here's the bridge. Here's all of them together. And then here's with the low cut. So you have a lot of different tonal variations here with these switches. The Bass 6 can play the range of an electric bass, but it doesn't have the same character in the overtones, and I want to show you. I actually took the same pick and I played those 4 basses, the Bass 6, the P bass, the jazz bass, and the Mustang, and I played a low E, and I recorded all of them, and then I'm running those audio files through a spectrogram and isotope, and I just want to show you because we can actually look at these notes. You're probably familiar with seeing something like this if you've done any recording. Oh, this is just like the waveform where left to right represents time and up and down represents amplitude. But if you look at a spectrogram, I can blend this in. This is a really powerful way to visualize sound because now we have 3 dimensions. We have 3 layers of information. Left to right is still our time, but now up and down is frequency, and then color is going to determine amplitude. So you can see how loud different overtones are in the frequency spectrum. So let's listen to it real quick. First is Bass 6, second is P bass, third is jazz bass, and then the 4th is the Mustang. Check this out. So cool seeing the difference. What's interesting to me, they all have very similar low end information. So these big orange stripes at the bottom, these are the sort of bottom of the overtone series. And also, if you aren't familiar with overtones and harmonics and that sort of stuff, it'd be a great YouTube rabbit hole to go down. I don't think you'd regret it because it's so interesting. Basically, the reason your voice sounds the way that it does and mine sounds the way that it does, or the reason that saxophone sounds different than a clarinet, or the reason a Bass 6 sounds different than a P bass, has to do with the overtones. different information, different frequencies. It's really, really fun, interesting stuff. But you can see the difference. So this first section is our bass 6, and then the second one is the P bass. And it's actually interesting to me. They all have similar information on these lower overtones, but then as it goes up, they have different sort of low mid characters, different information at different places. And actually we can look at a spectrum analysis, and we can actually see these overtones. And by the way, this is Isotope RX8 if you're interested in this kind of thing. That's the software that I'm using. It's software that we use in the film industry a lot, but it's really helpful for analyzing audio. I also work in the film industry when I'm not playing bass. So you can see these different bumps here, and these are different overtones. These are the different things that make up this sound. And we can actually see the pitches. So this is a low E that I played on each of these instruments. So we can see the fundamental. Here's an E. Here's a fifth. It's a B. Another E. That's another root. And then look, a G sharp. There is a third. And then another fifth, a B. And then we see a D, so it's a flat 7, and it goes on and on and on. You can see all of these notes or frequencies that make up each note. Inside of each note that you play, there are overtones that contain other notes. We can actually listen to them. This is really interesting. So like, listen to this real quick. I'm going to select this fundamental. You can hear this low pitch. That's a root. And then you're going to hear a fifth when I go up to this next stripe. Going to go up again. This should be another E. Right? Look up again. I think this is going to be a third. Here should be another fifth, another B. And then we're going to hear a flat 7 here. Isn't that cool? Inside of just an E, you have a D. You have a flat 7. And it starts to get weird when you listen to some of these like upper harmonics. It starts to sound kind of ugly, right? It's like, what is this? But when you hear the whole thing together, it's beautiful. All 4 of these distinctive Fender bass sounds have really different tones. They're similar, but you can see the difference. And the biggest difference that I'm encountering is in this low mid range. And actually, I'm going to go on a rant for a second. Look how beautiful the P bass is. This, we can see it right here. This is why I think the P bass always has been and always will be the most recorded bass tone in history. And I think it has to do with the science. Look at how beautiful these overtones are. This section of the music, you can see it's just so solid. It doesn't waver. It has all these beautiful lower fundamentals, but it has this really rich lower mid-range. And P basses are very mid-range, rich instruments. It's a self-mixing instrument, right? Because you have all of the right things in all the right places. You have this beautiful, lush, steady, consistent low mid-range. Compare those same frequencies to the jazz bass. The frequencies are also there, but you can see that they start to come and go. They're almost like shimmering or sparkling, which gives the jazz bass this really interesting texture, this really beautiful, complex sound, but it's not as consistent. Here, let's listen to just the mid-range of the P bass as opposed to the mid-range of the jazz bass. Isn't that cool? Like the P bass is more consistent and steady and solid in that mid-range, whereas the jazz bass is sort of shimmering. You can actually see the scooped nature of the jazz bass. You have a ton of low-end info, you have some interesting top-end info, but there's sort of this gap in weakness. I don't want to say weakness, but there's just less information in the mid-range, whereas the P bass is just so steady. And then also it's really interesting to look at this Mustang. Now I should say I happen to have half round strings on the Mustang right now. So that's part of why we don't see as much upper information, because the strings are a duller sound. But this is another self-mixing instrument. This is why I record mostly with either my P bass or my Mustang. It's for this very reason. Look at this. We have this beautiful spike that has all of this frequency information all the way up and down the frequency spectrum. But then it's almost like we have like a multi-band compressor with a slow attack where we let all that information through and then we clamped it down, and all that we're left with is this awesome sustain from these low frequencies. Listen to it. It's like we hear all this info and then we're left with just the business. You can hear it. It's like there's this spike of information. We know the note. We hear the pitch. Here it is. This is the note. But then that information subsides and we're left with just the business of the bass and all of what we want in the mix. So for a different reason, another self-mixing instrument, right? If that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for that cut and that clarity of pitch and then that sustain of the fundamental, the Mustang is awesome. If you want that really rich, steady, low mid information, the P-Bass is awesome. If you want that shimmery, interesting character and upper information and scooped mids, the Jazz Bass is awesome. Let's listen to them all one more time. So the order is Bass 6, P-Bass, Jazz Bass, Mustang. This is so cool seeing them all next to each other. I think that the weakness of the Bass 6 is also its strength. Maybe I shouldn't say weakness or strength. Maybe we should just say attributes. The sonic attributes of the Bass 6. Here's what's cool about it. If you look at this low mid-range here, and then the P-Bass after it, it's almost like they're mirror images of each other once you get to this area. You could almost take this and put it on top of this and it would fill in the gaps. They're almost fit together. And this is what's interesting to me. This is the mystery of the Bass 6. This is the weakness and the strength of the Bass 6. It is an excellent secondary bass instrument. If you take a P-Bass or an upright bass or something that is warm and rich and beautiful in the low mid-range, and then you take something like the Bass 6 that doesn't have as much of that information in the same place, you can put them together and they won't fight each other. That's why I think the Tic Tac sound was a success, and that's why I think the Bass 6 is a really important part of your musical arsenal. It's because it is a self-mixing instrument for a different reason. It's because it has different information in different places where you can drop it on top of another bass instrument and it won't fight as much. Because if you just EQ out some of this low, or so you can engage this switch and you could cut a lot of this fundamental low-end information and be left with this thin, twangy bass that is perfectly suited to sit on top of another bass instrument without fighting it. Here's what I'm getting at. I don't think this is ever going to replace your 4-string bass, but it may be the perfect thing to complement it. The Bass 6, its weakness is its low-mid information. That's its strength because that information isn't there, it can easily complement other low-end instruments. And it can cut and it can grab in the mix. And that's why you listen to these old Patsy Cline records. Oftentimes there's another bass that's playing that you don't notice, but you notice the Bass 6. It's a guitar that's cosplaying as a bass. You hear it, you hear the twang, you hear the low-end attitude, the sass, but it's not doing the business end necessarily. There's oftentimes another bass that's doing the business end of the bass and letting the Bass 6 shine as this sort of distinctive, twangy character. Letting those instruments sort of live in the sonic space that they want to, I think that's a really cool way to create music. Let them take the sonic spaces that they exist in naturally rather than trying to mash things together that don't fit into a hole in the music, right? I like to try and think like a mixing engineer when I'm coming up with parts or I'm choosing instruments. I think the Bass 6 is for a lot of people, actually. I think it's for the bass-curious guitar player. I think it's for the guitar-curious bass player. I think it's especially for the arranger or the producer, someone that likes to stack layers of music and explore different sounds. It's for someone that is playing surf rock or Western music or classic country or outlaw country music, but it's also for people that play rock music or indie rock music. This instrument can work in a lot of different genres. I didn't mention the Beatles used the Bass 6 on a lot of recordings. Cream used the Bass 6 on a lot of recordings. It can be played as a bass, but I think it thrives as a secondary bass. So here's the question. Is this a bass? Can we call this a bass? This is clearly a bass, but is this? This is an interesting philosophical question. A bass isn't how many strings it has. It's also not how big it is. Look, this is my Mustang, which is a 30-inch scale, and here's the Bass 6, and if we put those necks next to each other, and we look at it, the Bass 6 is a little bit longer. It's not how many strings it has. It's not how long the neck is or how long the strings are. To me, bass, the word bass, it means three things. There's the instrument that we're trying to define, but then there's also the role in an ensemble, a supportive role, and then there's the frequency, like the pitch and the range and where it exists in the sonic spectrum. You could be playing bass without playing a bass. A tuba is a good example. A tuba is a low frequency instrument and it's a supportive role in the ensemble, but it's not a bass. Or on the flip side, you could take a bass solo way up the neck playing melodies. You're departing the frequency and the role of bass in the ensemble, even though you're playing a bass, right? So I think bass is more the idea of the frequency and the role just as much as it is the instrument. So is this a bass? I think it just has to do with how you play it. I almost think of this instrument more as a guitar bass than a bass guitar. It's almost like an electric guitar that's cosplaying as a bass. Like, sure, it has the range, but the tone or the timbre is closer to electric guitar to my ear than the electric bass. And then based off of how you play it is going to determine its role in the ensemble. Oh, and before I forget, I need to say a big thank you to my friend Rhett. This is his Bass 6. I'm borrowing it to make this video. But if you're like me and you want to get your hands on one, I'm going to post an affiliate link. So that's a way that you can buy gear and then also help out the channel. I'll post some links to some other stuff that I use all the time. All of that will be in the description. Also, I am taking on private students now, and I have some bass courses. So if you want to check any of that stuff out, all the links are in the description. I had so much fun talking about this instrument. The Bass 6 is so cool, so unique, such an interesting part of music history. So thank you for hanging out, and I hope to see you on the next video.